Some time ago, I issued a challenge to YouTube atheists to give me their best proofs that God does not exist. And the first argument is in, so I would like to critique it. Now, before I critique it, you have to know what the argument is and who is making the argument. And you may want to, with all of these critique videos, you may want to watch the original videos first. In this case, it's not a video, but a PM that was sent to me by Theophage. And I normally wouldn't read a PM that somebody sends me for public viewing, but in this case, since I made it clear that I was planning on critiquing the arguments that come in, and since there is no video for this, I'll simply read the PM which was sent to me. And this is a version of the problem of evil, or the problem of pain. So Theophage, and I'll start the reading now. So this is Theophage's argument from suffering, and I quote: The argument from suffering. Howdy, Evangelical One. I just watched your video, Call to YouTube Atheists, and though I left one short argument in the comments, this one is a little too big. Write me back and let me know what you think. The argument from suffering. 1. If God exists, he is an omnipotent and omnibenevolent being. 2. If an omnipotent and omnibenevolent being exists, suffering would not exist in the world. 3. Suffering exists in the world. 3. Therefore, an omnipotent and omnibenevolent being does not exist. 5. Therefore, God does not exist. Okay, Theophage continues. First, we have to deal with premise 1. There certainly are possible God constructs that aren't omnipotent or omnibenevolent, such as a theistic God or any of the Greek gods. I'm not really worried about supporting premise 1, because this argument is really only targeted to those who would already agree that premise 1 is true. Excuse me. I am defining omnipotence as the ability to do anything that isn't logically inconsistent, in parentheses, no married bachelors or square circles, and omnibenevolence I'm defining as wanting the greatest possible good for every human. And then Theophage writes, next, let's jump to premise 3. I don't think this is very controversial, but if there is anyone out there who doubts the veracity of premise 3, well, dealing with a logical argument on a message board is the least of your problems. So that leaves us premise 2, the real workhorse of this argument. This is the one that I will attempt to defend here. Some would say that suffering is necessary, that it teaches us important lessons, that it gives us proper perspective on life, that it brings us closer to God, and that it allows us to truly appreciate the eventual paradise. God uses suffering, the believers say, to achieve the greater good. I agree with these things to an extent. I believe that good can come from suffering, and that understanding suffering does give us perspective. But if God is omnipotent, then there is nothing stopping him achieving these things without suffering. God is not limited in the same way humans are, and thus God is not stuck using unpleasant options to reach his goals. For example, humans do things which are necessary evils, and necessary evils is in quotation marks. A heart surgeon has to cut a patient's chest open, causing a great amount of pain, in parentheses, hopefully taken care of by drugs, and causing the body to possibly be exposed to life-threatening infections. If the surgeon had a magical device which he could just wave painlessly over the patient's chest, and the problem would be cured, he certainly would do that. But as humans are not omnipotent, we have to make do with the options that we have. An omnipotent God does not have to make do. He writes all the rules, he sets all the boundaries, and thus his hand is not forced into only a single option. if God cannot achieve whatever good comes from suffering without actually having the suffering take place, then he is not omnipotent and therefore not God. One possible example of an alternative would be to implant the memory of the necessary suffering into the brains of every single human as they are born. In this way, whatever mental change which comes from going through the suffering can still be had, and yet the world would still have no suffering, since it would all take place in the virtual world of memory, not in the outside world. But regardless of what the specific alternative to having suffering in the world is, I think it is valid to say that an omnipotent God would have the ability to achieve whatever goals he has without it, and an omnibenevolent God would want to do it that way. Thus, I believe this argument is a sound one. And that concludes the words of Theophage. And I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Okay, so that is the argument, a particular version of the problem of pain and evil. And starting in the next video, the sequel to this video, I will give my thoughts on this argument, why I believe it is unsound in the end. Okay, well, thank you, Theophage, for submitting that and being the first person to break the ice, and I do hope to hear more videos or more arguments against the existence of God in the future from you, if you are an atheist. Thank you, and have a great, wonderful day.